Hello and welcome everybody to you know what I forgot? I forgot our handy tunes that we play. All right, that sets the
Yeah.
show, Dr. All right, welcome to the Art of Healing with your host, Dr. Judy Jasek of Animal Healing Arts and Matt Rowe of ParsleyPet. During our show, we are talking about your pet's health, raw feeding, and alternative treatments for cancer, unexplained illnesses, and supporting your pet's natural ability to heal. Welcome, Dr. Judy, to this week's show.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this one's going to be fun. So you receive this question as well as we receive this question at ParsleyPet all the time. Is our dog receiving a balanced diet? How do I know I'm feeding correctly, especially with this rise of people that are making this beautiful leap into raw feeding and taking care of their pets naturally and really supporting their bodies, their ability to heal with everything that they have. So, how do you answer this question? Or maybe do we take a step back and talk about what they taught you in vet school? Because we were talking a little bit about this in pre-show. And so it was something that really was a little eye-opening, but can understand why they do it.
Yeah. Well, we know that veterinarians don't get much nutritional training in vet school. Neither do MDs, from what I understand. They don't get
Yeah,
nutritional training for people either.
right.
And in vet school, we are pretty much trained when it comes to like therapeutic nutrition. You
Mhm.
use the prescription diets, which are not prescription, but we've talked about that. So, which bag of food do you choose? But one of the things that I remember being told, and, it's funny how this stuck in my mind because this was a long time ago,
Well, it's
probably
only going to be like 2 years, right?
over. Yeah, right. Hey, I didn't get all this gray hair in 2 years. But anyway, I remember, so we had one nutrition class in vet school, and I remember the teacher saying one day that as long as there's a 1-800 number on the bag, so there's a place you can call if you have questions, then that's a sign that it's probably a reputable company. Nothing about reading labels, what the ingredients mean, the different nutrients, nothing. That was
Wow.
pretty much it. And then they would refer you to the prescription diet companies, which back then Hills was the only game in town, but
Mhm.
in the country probably.
Yeah.
So, they would refer us to that. But yeah, that was the extent of our nutritional training. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy to think that nutrition plays such a big role in all of our health. And whether animal, human, in any one of these things, it's like the cornerstone of health is what we put into our bodies and what we feed our pets. And so I'm always surprised regularly about the amount of education that goes into the nutrition side of it. Now, granted, it allows individuals like ourselves to build a company around getting dogs and cats as healthy as they can be. So, what really equals a nutritious diet? What do you look for in a diet? And if I feed raw, how do I know if I'm doing it right?
Yeah. So, I actually start putting that when I get that question, because I do get it all the time. I actually like to ask my client, because I'm curious where they're coming from. Well,
Mhm.
what do you mean by a balanced diet? Because everybody thinks
Mhm.
something different. So I feel like if I'm going to answer this question, I want to know where they're coming from. Are they looking for the amount of each micronutrient in the food, or does this feeding raw does not sit well with them? Like,
Mhm.
because what does balance mean? Like that could
Yeah.
mean something different to all sorts of different people. So I always like to find
Sure.
out where clients are coming from. But for me, balance means we're getting the right nutrients, right? We're getting the macro and micronutrients in the correct amounts and the correct proportions, because these nutrients work synergistically, as we've talked about. That's the advantage of feeding whole food, because you're going to have these nutrients in the form that nature intended, and where they're able to work together to create optimum nutrition for your pet. So I think first and foremost, we have to start and look at what type of animal are we feeding? We're feeding a dog, they're carnivores. Okay, people will make the case that dogs are omnivores. So yeah, they might scavenge, they might eat some plants, but what's the majority of their diet? What is their digestive system best equipped to ingest? They have long canine teeth for shearing. They have sharp molars. They don't have grinding teeth. Herbivores have grinding teeth. I think our mouths are an example of an omnivore, because we have some grinding teeth, we have some shearing teeth. Dogs have all shearing teeth. Those are meant to eat meat, be pulling meat off of a carcass, chewing meat off of bones and things like that. So I think we have to start there and then say, okay, what would a carnivore eat? What would that ideal meal look like? And so to me, the most logical place to look is our wild carnivores. You look at, wolves or coyotes, like what are they eating? They're not, sitting around the fire roasting popcorn and, making lentil soup or anything like that, right? They're eating the elk.
And you think about it one other side. Look at their jaw. Their jaw moves like this. When you look at our jaw, we'll go side to side in order to grind the food that we have. And so when you look at it at a wolf or a coyote or your dog, it's meant to grab and hold and then pull off and then tear those feet, like use those sharper teeth to cut away a section of meat so then they can ingest it. They don't grind it down, or they don't, really chew it to make sure it's mine. I mean, it's grab, pull a piece off, and swallow.
Yeah, and the digestion too, if you look at dog saliva as compared to like our saliva, our digestion actually does start in our mouths. There's enzymes in our saliva. That's why you're supposed to chew your food well, because it starts to break down in your mouth. In a dog, their saliva is mostly just a lubricant. It's to get it, help get the food down the stomach and get it fast. And, I have so many people ask, my dog's eating raw and they eat it so fast. Like, that's really the way dogs are meant to eat. When they're picking at that bowl of kibble, it's because they don't like it, or they don't feel good after they eat it, but they end up eating it because there's no choice. That's all they got. But when they eat raw, their systems are really designed to just wolf that food down, right? Pun intended.
No pun intended.
Because you think about it, a wolf pack out in the wild, they just took down the elk. Well, the grizzly bear could be coming any minute. So they don't have time to sit and chew 32 times before they swallow their food. They're filling their stomach. Then they're going to go hide out somewhere and sleep off their food coma,
Yeah.
And they may not eat again for a couple more days, and that's an actual natural cycle. So I think it's important to think about these things in addition to thinking about the nutrients. Like what are the types of foods that a dog is actually meant to eat? Because I think there's such a tendency towards anthropomorphism, and I know I do it too. I pretend that my dogs are people in dog suits, and we like to treat them in a way that we think makes us healthy, and it's not the same. It's not the same. They need to eat that carnivore diet. A lot of dogs do better eating just once a day. Don't feed them throughout the day. When I talk to people and they're like, well, they don't want to eat a lot in the morning. We don't feed them in the morning. They're carnivores. They're fine eating once a day. If you have a routine and you like to feed your dog twice a day for whatever reason, that's my routine with my dogs. It has been for years, and I'll probably keep doing it. But if a dog is not eating well in the morning, what I often see is people don't like to see their dog skipping a meal. So they'll keep offering them things and offering them things and offering them things. And pretty soon your dog's gonna be like, I'm going to see what they're going to offer me next because, keeps getting better. Maybe
Do
by
they keep up
tonight.
in the game?
Yeah, maybe by tonight they'll be feeding me pizza or something,
Exactly. And this was explained to me. So somebody that I have followed a lot is Casey Maxwell out of San Francisco Raw, who's a big fan of our show. And she told me when I kept going to her and being like, is this right? Is this the right thing to do? Is it balanced here? Why would you feed this? She goes, Matt, really simply, look at your dog as being wild. They're only truly maybe 100, 120 years away from being a wild dog.
Right.
And they're like, and your wild dog, and this happens even today, would catch a rabbit in the field and eat that rabbit. But what's in the rabbit? Bone, meat, fur. They're eating a little bit of the soil off the ground. They're eating organs. They're eating brain, eyeballs, and they're eating all of these parts until they're either satisfied or they have to leave because another predator comes up or they have to go. So they're eating as fast as they can and they're pulling that rabbit apart. So when you look at, you use such a beautiful word, anthropomorphize. Did I say that right?
Right. It's a big word.
Is humanizing your pet in some of these categories. So when you're feeding that balanced raw diet, it's thinking about the rabbit. When I feed Leo and Mr. Cha-Cha, I think about, okay, are they getting enough bone content? Are they getting enough organ meat? Is they getting iron from that? Are they getting enough muscle meat? Because that's where they get the phosphorus and that's where they get all of the pieces, and making sure that I'm aligning those areas up in appropriate amounts.
Right. Yeah. Right. And the balance. So when we talk about balance, I don't ever look at, like measuring individual nutrients in the food. I look at like what you're saying. Okay, what would an ideal diet in the wild for a certain dog look like? So it's a rabbit. So what percentage of that diet is bone? What percentage of that rabbit would be bone? What percentage would be muscle meat and organ meat, etc. Even the fur has a lot of nutritional value for dogs that actually ingest fur. Fur has, you do hair analysis, there's a lot of nutrients actually in the fur, and dogs are, meant to, ideally ingest that. So you look at what they're eating, like, okay, now how do we replicate that? Because it's not just about measuring the amounts, how many, IUs or milligrams or micrograms of certain nutrients, because these nutrients are in a whole food form. They work together with other nutrients. And I don't think we even know how exactly that mechanism works. I mean, it's kind of impossible to know exactly because it's biology. But when you start micromanaging the nutrients and you say, okay, there's this many IUs of vitamin A in this food, it meets AFCO standards, who's the agency that makes nutritional recommendations that are suboptimal, to say the least.
Yes.
That's being generous, probably.
That's being very nice, Dr. G.
So it meets those standards. And so that makes it good. But these are synthetics. You have no idea how well those are going to be integrated into your dog's body or utilized. So what I tell people, the biggest word is rotation. Dogs are natural scavengers. Don't feed them the same protein over and over and over and over again. They're not going to get as much benefit as if you rotate. So the first step is rotating proteins. Rotate your red meats with your poultry, with pork, with lamb. If you find something just doesn't agree with your dog for whatever reason, then don't feed it. It's that simple. You have to look at your pet. I think people get used to this one size fits all. Just tell me what's the best food to put in my dog's bowl, and I don't have to think about it. You want a healthy pet, you have to think about it. You have to, use your brain, use a little common sense, rotate the different proteins, and then rotate the different body parts like we were talking about. And if the dog eats a rabbit, they're eating the brains and the eyes and all the intestines and everything. So I always say, add in additional organ meat or things like tripe or, granted, it's hard to get all of those body parts, but there's actually some supplement companies that have, you know, glandulars and different organs that are dried in capsules.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Sure.
you can get those in a whole food form rather than just feeding the synthetics. But I've seen, you know, so many people that just get so nervous just trying to do this whole food rotation. Then they'll go back to a food. They'll go buy, they may even stick with a raw diet, but they're going to get one that's got that label that says, okay, we added these nutrients. But whenever that label, the only way they're going to know, you know, those exact measurements of those nutrients is if it's a synthetic. They're not going to know that in a whole food form. And so when
Mhm.
you see that label, that is just giving the human brain some comfort. It isn't really doing anything for your pet.
Right. And you brought up the point about being bioavailable. I've read where the pet food companies, because let's just take selenium, for example, is a nutrient that we all need inside of our bodies for optimal health. And what they'll do is they'll add 9 times above the required amount of selenium just to meet the minimum standard because they realize that it's not bioavailable to them in the synthetic form. And so, in order for the dog just to get the minimum, they have to add 9 times above the required limit of selenium inside the diet. So, I mean, so the point you're making in regards to they kind of don't know how well the natural or the raw based diet is really supplying all these nutrients because they're all working together in this symbiotic relationship that when you're going after putting the right amount in the diet, the best way to do it is thinking of that rabbit. It's thinking about, okay, are they getting it right? Because in order to create bone structure, you have to have the bone that they're eating from an animal that they're getting calcium from, but also the right amount of phosphorus to go and create that right cellular bone structure. And so really when, it's almost frightening how much they're using, the pet food companies are using your dog as an experiment. And as long as my food doesn't kill a large amount of dogs, maybe I got it right. Maybe I'm putting the right amount of nutrients, even though I can see exactly how many IUs are going in or milligram percentages are going into the diet. Doesn't mean that's what they're getting.
And the testing that is done for on commercial foods, it's about survivability. And there's a huge
Mm,
difference between surviving and thriving. I mean, I see this
yeah.
all the time. Dogs come in. I had a lady come in and her dog, it was kind of cute. She called her dog a puddle. This was a young dog
Mhm.
and just had no energy, just no energy. It's like
Mm,
less than a year, right around a year. Um, and it just kind of lay there, had no energy. And put the dog on raw, just a couple weeks on raw. And she's
mhm.
like, my dog isn't a puddle anymore. Actually wants to do stuff, has energy. So was that dog alive and functioning on the former diet? Sure. But
Sure.
it certainly wasn't thriving. And, you know, I think this is a big part of what went on with the whole, you know, DCM thing and the
Mhm.
taurine is that part of the issue was that the diets the dogs were eating were either not being supplemented with enough taurine or some of the ingredients were maybe binding with the taurine, but for whatever reason, they're
Right.
adding it in a synthetic form and it's not getting absorbed, or they're just not putting enough in. Just like we said,
Sure.
if you are just micromanaging these nutrients and doing one at a time and they're not being ingested with the
Mhm.
nutrients they're meant to work together with. So then you don't need as many of each one because they do
Right.
work synergistically.
Mhm.
The dogs just weren't getting enough. And I think that's a big part of the picture. And I think that's a glaring example of what happens when humans who think they're so smart can micromanage these nutrients. And you know, the other thing to think about is if your dog eats a rabbit, it's eating a living thing. So that rabbit, prior to your dog eating it, was alive and functional. So it has, you know right there, all the nutrition necessary for life is in that
Mhm.
animal and all that vitality for life.
Mhm.
There's nothing living in a bag of dry food. Like
No.
it's dead, toxic food. So if you think about it,
Right.
what's going to be healthier for your pet eating something that's alive, fresh
Mhm.
food? And
Mhm.
this translates into buying a commercial raw product as well, because it's still unprocessed animal products, as
Mhm.
composed to a bag of dry, dead kibble. I mean, to me, it's
Mhm.
just a no-brainer. You don't have to know anything about nutrition. Just use your common sense.
Yeah, you make a great point, is using that common sense that comes into it. I mean, when you look at so much that happens in the amount of food that goes into our body, our dogs, if left out to their own devices, are going to seek food and nutrients and scavenge that promotes their health. They're not going to eat things that make them sicker. So, or they will avoid it. So, for example, a great point on this is when I feed pumpkin to both of my dogs. Now, Leo, being a 70-pound Catahoula, he will consume the couch if we allow him. But if you look at Mr. Chacha, who is a 14-pound, 14-year-old Chihuahua, he's picky. He knows, I mean, at some point through his 14 years, he knows, I don't want to eat that because that's going to make me feel bad. And I'm going to eat this. So we were feeding pumpkin to both of them. And pumpkin is a great place to get magnesium and fiber inside of the diet. And so when we were feeding to him, he ate it for 3 weeks and then he just stopped eating.
Hmm.
I was concerned. I was like, oh my gosh, why did he stop eating? Does he not like it? And then my mentor looked at me and said, Matt, he probably doesn't need it anymore. He doesn't want to consume something that is going to make him sick. Or all of a sudden, maybe he was getting an upset stomach and he attributed that smell gave me an upset stomach. This smell made me feel good. And so he started to lean towards the raw meal. And
Mhm.
so he leaned there and then gave it a couple of weeks and reintroduced pumpkin and then ate the pumpkin again. Now, when I test both the dogs, both of them come back with excellent results because we've had a show on this on over supplementation. Is I could have said, I could have panicked at that moment and said, oh, he's not getting enough magnesium, and then snuck in a magnesium
Mhm.
supplement on top of the diet. And ultimately, he probably was receiving too much. And because I was sneaking it in, he didn't know that I was sneaking it in the diet, which would make him sicker and over supplementing what they need. And so, your dogs, if left to their own devices in the wild, they are going to seek out live animals. I mean, they don't want to go scavenge. I mean, for McDonald's hamburgers, they don't want to dig through the trash. That is a necessity. Okay, I smell it. I'm hungry. I have to eat it, and they'll go that route. But I think ultimately, if left to their own devices, Leo is going to hunt rabbits because that's what he wants. He knows that is going to make me feel good and allow me to stay alive longer and perpetuate my breed or perpetuate myself even further, living this and thriving in this life. Because the puddle that you gave the beautiful example of, if that dog was in the wild and it was sleepy and tired and not energetic, how long would he have
Yeah.
made it?
Well, be gone.
Yeah, I mean,
It,
this
it,
is reality we have to face. Is yeah,
yeah.
they live a beautiful life in our homes, and we care for them and pet them and love them. But ultimately, when we feed them, to balance that diet is getting out of humanizing our pets to some degree and thinking, what does a carnivore eat?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember they don't eat the same thing every day.
Mm,
So, like your example with the pumpkin, something like that, like maybe Cha-Cha just needs a little bit 2 or 3 times a week, and
yeah,
then he's fine. So when they
yeah,
do stop eating something like that, a lot of times it can be their body saying, they just don't need it. Dogs
mhm,
don't eat a dog in the wild or like a wolf pack, they're not going to eat the exact same thing every
mhm,
day. They're going to
yep,
be scavenging and seeing what they can find. And so when you're adding in things like, and I think especially when it comes to produce and other items like that, I tell people, experiment, but don't feed the exact same
Mhm.
thing every day. Add a little bit of maybe a little vegetable for a couple of days and see how your dogs do, because some, based on the needs of their microbiome, some
Mhm.
might do better with a little extra vegetable fiber, some not. They won't eat the
Mhm.
vegetables. Nutritionally, we can balance their diet just fine with animal products. Some dogs do better on them and like their food better. So it's probably something that their body needs. But just because there's something that they're eating today that they really
Mhm.
like, that does not mean that that's the food that they need to eat every day for the rest of their life. I think variety is really important to
Mhm.
get that proper nutrition, and especially with additions. And I'll tell people, if I talk to somebody and they're giving their dog, all these different supplements, and we did a show on supplements, that's one thing I'll suggest is, okay, if you want to give these, at least rotate them. Don't give
Mhm.
everything every day, and then maybe
Right.
stop them, one at a time for a few days. Because I'll always ask, well, do you know if this is helping your dog? And most of the
Mhm.
time people don't know. It just sounded like a good idea. Like, well, stop them. A lot of times I'll recommend just stopping all supplements, see how your dog does, and then
Yeah.
add them back in one at a time. If you don't notice
Sure.
a benefit, then why are you spending the money on it? Because a lot of people say, oh, well, we can't afford, raw feeding, or it's expensive. Well,
Mhm.
if you weren't giving them those, 5 or 6 supplements, you probably would be saving, $100 a month or something that you could put towards
Mhm.
that raw food, which is going to be healthier for the dog in the first place.
Well said. That, yeah, that's, I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, with everything that we're doing with our pets, I think we tend to overcomplicate it. I know the
Yeah.
simpler I go, and we buy our food from the same supplier, which is Raw Dog Food Company, and they are taking the right amount of bone and the right amount of organ, and you can look at those levels. Just when you go to their website to go buy it, I can see, okay, this one's going to have 12 to 15% bone content. This has got 12 to 15% organ content. I know from what feeding a dog healthy has the right amount of muscle, has the right amount of organ, right amount of bone, and we can balance that out. But then I don't add anything else. I just take that. I take this 2 pound tube of meat, and then I feed the appropriate amount based on the ideal weight that I want to actually, that's what I feed both of my dogs, and they maintain a healthy weight. Their tests come back beautifully without me having to add any supplements, without adding anything more to the diet. And as long as, and I love the what you said about rotating the food. I think that's a thing as well. As for example, if you feed kibble, you're feeding the same thing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what they're getting. They're getting the AVCO prescribed amount of nutrients in the diet in a synthetic base, and you're feeding the same thing over and over and over again. And then we wonder why our dogs get sick, or we wonder why they have upset stomachs, or we wonder why they're itching a lot, or their fur is falling out, or something is happening as a result of that. I know if I eat the same thing every day, for example, if I eat McDonald's every day, my hair is going to fall out more than it's falling out right now. I mean, it's going to get bad. There's going to be lesions. There's going to be all of this stuff that is really
Yeah.
going to affect my health. So now your dog being a carnivore is going to go find all of these various animals that it can. So, for example, if Leo was wild again and he's running through the field, if he can't find a rabbit but finds, let's say, a mouse or a rat, guess what? That's dinner tonight. I'm going to eat that mouse or rat. Or if he's trolling along the side of a pond and there's a duck there, he's going to eat the duck if he can catch it. I mean, there's all of these things. And, granted, the breed hunts wild boar. If he finds himself a wild boar or a pig and gets his pack to take it down, guess what? That's going to be dinner tonight. So it's really on that side of, yeah, they're going to be opportunistic. They're going to find what
Yeah.
they can.
But you're not going to find them in the cornfield or the wheat field grazing.
No. And you don't find them with coveralls on planting and getting prepared because spring's coming and you got to plant my peas and those are going to come out here in, May, June, and I'm going to get to enjoy those. No, No way is your dog going to do that. They're really going to take a look at it and say, what can I get right now? I mean, we both know with both of our dogs, they are not patient. When they want dinner, they let you know, I want dinner now. And if they were in the wild, if they get that craving, I need to eat, they're going to go start looking for it. They're not going to wait for it to grow.
Right. Exactly.
Mhm. Well, Dr. Judy, this is just such an awesome show. I love this topic. And I think we really can help our dog's health if we feed them appropriately. And we feed them in a balanced structure, meaning a variety of meats, right amount of bone content, right amount of organ content. Don't overthink it. Don't humanize it. Just go simple. Because your
Yeah, and
dog is
get
making
some,
it simple.
and get some help. It's different, and I think
Yeah.
as humans, it's making a change, doing something different, a little outside your comfort zone, not
Mhm.
something you're used to. Just get a little advice on it from somebody that knows how to feed, raw. Be careful with the social
Yeah.
media because there's a lot of mixed information out there, but get some
Mhm.
advice just to get started. And then once you get started, it's so easy. It's not, there's nothing hard or complicated about it. It's just different. And I see it
Right.
transform pets all the time. When pets get on raw, eating raw, they transform all the time. Their health just improves dramatically. So there's just no question in my mind that this is the best way to feed pets.
And it's beautiful to watch when they do. They come in
Hmm.
tired, they come in with some ailments, and then all of a sudden they flip over to a raw diet. And it's almost like their health is thanking you. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of like, thank you so much, Mom, for listening to Dr. Judy. So if you do need some advice, you want to know where to go, Dr. Judy's information is below in the actual description part of this is her website where you can get her phone number and everything that you need, or contact us over at ParsleyPet. We can either point you in the right direction or we can help you adjust the diet as well for what a pet ultimately needs, what your dog needs as a carnivore.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to help people get their dogs off on the
Mhm.
right track nutritionally, because it's the single most important thing. And I tell people that all the time.
Yeah,
Feeding a species appropriate fresh food diet is the single most important thing you can do for your pet, hands down.
well said. Well, thank you, Dr. Judy, for this week's show. I hope all you guys start thinking about, if you're not feeding raw, you're thinking about feeding raw and starting that journey of feeding raw. And if you're feeding raw and you're kind of concerned or you're curious about it, get some help. Call one of us, call somebody else that you know, that you trust. And I know your pet will thrive when they're put on the right diet.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, hey, enjoy your day, Dr. Judy, and thank you guys so much for being a part of this with us.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
See ya.